Starmer claimed repeatedly that his government believes in free speech and was not engaged in censorship. But his country's government arrests people for memes and thought crimes, and even more worrisome is pressuring American companies to censor Americans on its behalf.
It was meant to be a routine interview, Keir Starmer's chance to showcase his leadership, take control, and win the public's trust. But it quickly spiraled into a total disaster.
It's my personal mission to smash the people smuggling gangs. The only way to stop that is to smash the gangs. We have to smash those gangs.
The moment he stepped in, the air was charged. No cheers, just demanding eyes. They wanted answers, not rehearsed speeches. But Starmer stuck to his usual script, vague promises and empty lines. And that's when it all began to unravel. The first questions were soft, the kind every politician expects. But then came the tough ones. Sharp, direct, cutting through the usual political fluff. Why backtrack on promises? Why ignore the country's biggest issues? And why did he seem more interested in pleasing elites than listening to the people? Instead of rising to the challenge, Starmer stumbled. He hesitated, his answers contradicting his past statements. The audience wasn't buying it. Murmurs turned to scoffs, and curiosity quickly morphed into frustration. The mood shifted. People weren't just questioning him anymore. They were turning against him, and that was just the start. At first, Starmer had walked in with his usual confidence. Suit sharp, shoulders square, voice steady. He greeted the crowd, flashed a polite smile, and launched into the same old speech, full of empty promises and rehearsed lines about moving the country forward. But something felt off.
That there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British, of course what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history.
The energy in the room was anything but welcoming. It wasn't even neutral. A quiet tension hung in the air, as if the audience had already made up their minds before he spoke. As Starmer talked, there were no nods of agreement. Instead, arms were crossed, eyebrows raised, and skeptical glances exchanged. The polite applause at the start quickly faded into silence. Then came the murmurs, soft at first, but growing. Some whispered to their neighbors, others shook their heads. They weren't just listening, they were analyzing, doubting, waiting for something real, and Starmer could feel it.
The first priority of this government is the security and safety of the British people. It is the first priority. In this sector, when it comes to defence and security, there's a real bursting pride that goes with it. And so we're investing in our security, but we're also investing in peace. We're investing in British pride. And I promise you this, we will step up together to lead the world on the challenges in this era. This government will put Britain first every step of the way.
He shifted his weight, hands gripping the podium. His eyes flicked down repeatedly, searching for something, anything to steady his thoughts. When he took a sip of water, it wasn't a casual motion. It was the kind of sip people take when they're stalling, buying time. It was clear. This wasn't going as planned. But the real storm hadn't even hit yet. Then it came. Mr. Starmer, you've changed. Your stance on key policies has shifted repeatedly. How can the public trust you when it feels like you say one thing to one group and something else to another? The air in the room thickened.
Absolutely nowhere.
But almost 4 years ago, you were talking about the need to reduce immigration.
Yes, I was.
You said, I think, now you're talking about free movement. I mean, it doesn't seem that you've learned any lesson from this at all.
You keep putting this to me, and I keep saying...
That's my point.
I know, but you're not listening to what I'm saying, because I have... One of the ways I operate, and have done now since 2015 when I came into Parliament, is to go to the very communities where I need to listen, and listen. And that's what I've been doing.
For a moment, Starmer froze. His usual smooth delivery hit a wall. He tried to recover, forcing a smile, and launched into a long-winded spiel about adapting to challenges, responding to the people's needs. But it fell flat. The words sounded empty. The audience wasn't buying it. Then came the real pushback. The reporter pressed on, relentless. But just last year, you promised no tax hikes. Now taxes are rising. You said you'd stand by workers' rights, but you've turned your back on key union pledges. Isn't this exactly why people don't trust politicians?
To make fun of Nigel Farage falling over Putin. Yesterday, Keir Starmer put out this tweet in which he said economic security is national security, right? Fair enough. He then says British jobs, British skills and British finance will pull together for our national interest to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position on peace. He then says, basically, that this will create money for people to have in their pockets. Well, how's that going to work?
The crowd's mood shifted. A few scoffs, then laughter. From the back, a mutter, typical. Near the front, a man's voice cut through. Just answer the question. Starmer's smile faltered. His face tightened. The energy in the room was no longer skeptical. It was outright hostile. This wasn't just questioning him. They were rejecting him. And just when it seemed it couldn't get worse, a brutal question hit. Prime Minister, you claim to support free speech, yet your government has pushed laws that restrict online expression. How do you justify that contradiction?
Let's start off by painting the picture. There's Starmer, shoulder to shoulder with President Trump, bold as brass, declaring that we've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom. Starmer's not just bending the truth, he's taking it for a full spin cycle. He's proudly boasting about our history of free speech while conveniently forgetting about the Orwellian nightmare we're living in right now. The recently enacted Online Safety Act is a prime example of this assault on liberty. Under the guise of protecting users, this draconian legislation imposes a legal responsibility on social media platforms to identify and mitigate illegal content or harmful material. In essence, it's the government's way of saying, we know what's best for you, so shut your gob. This act forces tech companies to become de facto thought police, deciding what's harmful and what's not, with the government overseeing the entire process. It's a chilling reminder that Big Brother is indeed watching your every tweet, post, and comment. The extent of this crackdown on free speech is truly alarming. Since October 2023, nearly 300 people have been charged in the UK for online speech crimes. Let that sink in. 300 British citizens hauled before the courts for daring to express themselves.
Starmer straightened, trying to sound confident. The United Kingdom has always championed free speech. Under my leadership, that will never change. But it fell flat. The room knew the truth. His government had passed laws expanding authorities' power over online content. Critics warned these laws could silence opposition. Tech giants, even journalists, were sounding the alarm. One reporter fired back, "Why are platforms and free speech advocates saying your policies threaten open debate?" Starmer hesitated, offering vague talk of responsible speech and protecting society. The crowd wasn't buying it. Quiet chuckles, eye rolls, even groans spread through the room. He had walked into another trap and everyone saw it. As he tried to regain control, the next question hit like a gut punch. Prime Minister, with rising taxes, stagnant wages, and failed trade deals, why should the British people trust you to fix this?
Labour would freeze council tax next year. Yes, you heard it right. Not a penny more on your council tax. Not a penny more than the bill you paid last year.
It seems remarkable. Let's say a very good morning to Theo Usherwood. Theo, very good morning to you.
Very good morning to you.
It seems remarkable to me that there are so many of these types of clips of Keir Starmer, because it's one thing to, promise something, it's one thing to kind of, suggest something, but he's so sure that these things are not going to happen. And this is not the only instance of it. I mean, what sort of an individual would make those kinds of absolutely bold statements and then completely disregard them? I mean, even by political standards.
It was political expedience.
The room fell silent. All eyes on Starmer. He launched into another scripted response. Tough decisions, long-term stability, but it was weak, defensive. He talked about fairness and investment, ignoring the warnings of businesses already predicting economic slowdown under his leadership. Then the real blow. A voice from the crowd cut through. "You're making it worse." A few laughed, others nodded. Where's the growth? someone added. Starmer's face tightened. He tried to push through, but the shift in the room was clear. He wasn't convincing anyone. He wasn't even holding their attention anymore. Worse, he was losing control, and the hostility was growing stronger.
Will we be hauled off for having a grumble about the government down at the local? Will we need a licence to have an opinion? And if we look at what was proposed in Scotland, it was exactly that. You could be penalised for what you thought and said in your own home. Let's not forget, this isn't just affecting the average Joe on the street. This censorship is creeping into every corner of our society. Our universities, once a bastion of free thought and debate, at times quite radical free thought and debate, are now more concerned with safe spaces and trigger warnings than challenging ideas.
The interview had spiraled from bad to humiliating. Starmer was sinking and the host wasn't letting up. Prime Minister, you've dodged questions on free speech, the economy, and trust. Can you give us a straight answer on why your leadership is failing to deliver? Starmer exhaled sharply, his composure cracking. He tried to respond, but his voice wavered. Look, we're making progress, but these things take time. The crowd erupted. What progress? Someone shouted. Another laughed. Murmurs of anger spread like wildfire. His body language betrayed him. He shifted in his seat, wiped his forehead, took a nervous sip of water. He glanced at the host, silently begging for a lifeline, but none came. The interviewer stayed firm, letting the silence press down on him.
We've set up the National Wealth Fund because we want every person and every community to benefit. It's why we've unlocked planning decisions, because we're going to build 1.5 million new homes.
Then came the moment that sealed his fate. A voice from the crowd, loud enough for the microphones to catch, muttered, "This is embarrassing." Starmer heard it. Everyone did. His face stiffened. His eyes darted, desperate for an escape. He had lost them completely. There was no coming back. As the interview ended, the real damage began. Within minutes, headlines flashed. Starmer crumbles under pressure. UK PM humiliated in fiery showdown. Leadership meltdown in real time. Even his usual supporters struggled to spin the disaster.
Issues that he thought were close to the public's heart, whether that be council tax, whether that be the waspy women. And he was quick, of course, to make promises that sided him on the right side of the British public, with the British public against the government of the day. That's what he did, right? Now, the problem he had was he wasn't able, having come into government, he wasn't able to back it up. So whether it be the winter fuel allowance, whether it be council tax, or whether it be the waspy woman, he's ended up in a situation where he's had to break those promises. And the British public, and it's always been the case, Mike, trust is hard earned and easily lost. The British public don't really care for that. They don't mind you telling it like it is, right? They don't mind politicians telling them like it is, that times are really tough. But you've got to be honest from the outset. What they don't like is they don't like hypocrisy. They don't like being told one thing and then a pivot. They don't like being told one thing and then something else turns out.
Social media erupted. Clips of Starmer's worst moments spread like wildfire. One video of him stumbling through an economic question was looped with circus music, racking up millions of views in hours. Another, where he nervously wiped his forehead, turned into endless memes. The internet showed no mercy. Twitter was ruthless. If Starmer can't handle tough questions, how's he supposed to handle world leaders? One user wrote, another posted, this wasn't an interview, it was a political obituary. Even within his own party, panic spread. Some tried to downplay it, calling it a challenging moment, but others, speaking off the record, admitted this was a disaster.
Had Labour won the election in 17 or 19, would you be happy to serve in the cabinet under Prime Minister Corbyn?
Well, I didn't think we'd win either of those, Graham, and there's no getting away from that. And certainly,
no, just a simple yes or no. If you were part of the shadow cabinet, would you be happy to serve in his cabinet if he won?
Well, Graham, it's a pure hypothetical. Didn't cross my mind because I didn't think we would win. But let me just,
you campaigned for him because you thought you wouldn't win.
Look, I campaigned.
And the worst part, this wasn't going away. Every future press conference, every debate, he'd be haunted by this night. The big question now, can his leadership survive, or is this the beginning of the end? This interview wasn't just a bad night, it was a turning point. Starmer's credibility took a massive hit, and his leadership looks weaker than ever. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe. More videos are on screen now.